Welcome to another episode of Brainstorm Black. I'm Charlotte Moore, your host, and today's topic I love because we are talking about skin. Skin, beautiful, beautiful skin. There's so many different people in the world, so many different skin colors. I think skin is beautiful. It's the largest organ on the human body. When you look at someone, it's the very first thing you see. The problem is we begin to judge people based on their skin, based on what they look like. Well, our guest today is someone who has this visionary idea about skin and ways that we can begin to be aware of how we look at each other and judge each other based on that. Her name is Sharon Miller. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Charlotte.
I'm glad you're here. Skin is Skin is the organization you co-founded.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about what it is.
So Skin is Skin is a social enterprise. That means it's a business that has a very strong emphasis on a mission. And our mission, stated very plainly, is to try and help end discrimination.
End discrimination. End discrimination. I love that.
Yeah, a lofty goal.
Yes.
I'll agree, but that's what we want to do.
And I think it's possible. It's going to be hard, but I think it's possible to end discrimination. I love that. So before we get into the organization and the social enterprise, I love that and what that's about, tell us a little bit about you. Where are you from? How long have you been in the Austin area?
Sure. Well, I started my career actually in London working for Jim Henson and the Muppets. And
wow.
I was in the publicity department writing press releases and giving tours around the studio. We were working on the film Labyrinth at the time with David Bowie. Don't know if you remember that one. It was very weird, lots of large puppets.
Yes.
And whatnot. So that's where I started my career.
Huh. I did not know that. That's the first time you've mentioned that to me.
I know, do you know, yes, anyway, I forget. It's so long ago now.
And talk about skin with the Muppets. And
yeah.
Awesome.
But I've always really been interested in sort of these creative mavericks, you know, and just later on in my career, sort of also how creativity can really lend itself to solving social problems as well. Yeah. So just sort of really taking that and kind of focusing on that. After the Muppets, I actually moved to America. I ended up marrying a drummer in the show band on a cruise ship. That's a whole other story in and of itself. But that took me to Portland, Oregon, where I worked for an advertising agency and on accounts like Nike and ESPN, and did a lot of international work there.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, so Skin is Skin. Since you're talking about the kind of work you've done, I want to watch a video very quickly that you produced, and I saw the video and I was like, God, I wish I could do video like that. It's gorgeous. Let's look at that, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more. So that video is called Go Beyond, and I loved some of the stuff that it said. See me for who I am. Ask before you judge. Ask before you shoot. Like, this is serious stuff.
Whew. Yeah, we did debate quite a lot how direct we were going to be. And there were a couple of things about that in terms of Magat. Magat's my business partner. Magat and I both are really direct and are kind of keen to sort of not beat around the bush in terms of these problems, but also in terms of the solutions as well, and just sort of get down to the nitty-gritty of going like, well, we're going to do something, we're going to take some personal actions. But a couple of things about that video, one of them is that we wanted to use real people. instead of models, because the whole concept is really about being curious about people beyond their skin. And instead of doing the sort of fake model, we just looked for real people who had all these very interesting things about them that you wouldn't necessarily guess, right? They're sort of non-stereotypical. So it just kind of fit the whole concept very well.
And they're all beautiful. Like it's compelling. You can't really look away because of how it's shot, and so it's lovely. I love that.
Yeah, it turned out well.
I actually know one of the women. I'd seen the video before. I was looking at it earlier today. Melanie Holst Collins, I think is her name.
Yeah, the yoga lady.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I know her. So that was very cool. Then I could relate even more to that. So
Yeah.
good job. I love it.
Right.
Okay, so you mentioned Magat. I want to make sure we talk a little bit about her. Who is she? I want to hear about how you met her and how the two of you're so physically different. So she's about my skin tone, beautiful dark brown skin. You have this beautiful, what they call alabaster skin. It's gorgeous. And the two of you together are such a contrast, beautifully so.
Yeah.
So how did you meet?
Well, Magat and I actually met on a plane at Austin Airport. We were sitting next to each other, and we got talking mainly because I'm claustrophobic and was in a really sort of nervous state that day and was feeling like I was going to have a panic attack. And one of the ways in which you can get over a panic attack is to start talking to people, because it gets your brain off the fact that you're scared. So I had turned to Magat and was talking to her just to alleviate my panic attack. And Magat was very, very pleasant, and she sort of looked over and answered my question and then sort of put her head deeply back in her book. And I know that's the international sign for don't bother me, but I had to keep on talking to her because otherwise I was going to have this panic attack. So I sort of launched into more conversation, and finally we sort of hit upon a topic that we both got really interested in. And we got right into a really deep discussion about the state of xenophobia in the world. And the whole way to New York, we were both going to New York, we just like hashed out what's going to happen, what we're going to do, and blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of the conversation, Magat's like, I really want to start a company that tackles discrimination. And I was like, well, I'm a brand strategist. Let's talk when we get back. And so 4 coffee meetings later, we decided to start Skin is Skin.
Serendipity.
Yep.
That's beautiful.
I know.
Love that.
That was good.
Awesome. So let's talk about the organization. One of exercises. So a big part of it, there are 2 things. Let's start with the exercises, though. Tell us about the exercises, how you came to develop them, because that I love. It's fascinating, too.
Well, Magat and I are both doers, and we get a little bit tired of rhetoric. And not to say there isn't a time for conversation, but we are both like, let's figure it out, and then let's do something. So we went on this kind of deep dive in terms of research to try and find out what there was out there in terms of things that you can actually do. Because we felt like there was a lot of well-intentioned people, but not armed with any personal actions that they could take. And there was a sort of level of frustration, myself included. So we found these scientists at the University of Wisconsin who developed a training program, and they've been working on it for 10 years. And they've proven that these exercises in their training program actually rewire the brain and undo the habit of bias.
Wow.
So that was really compelling to us because we're like, there's 5 exercises, there's things you can do. You do them yourself.
Scientifically based.
Proven.
Right.
Yeah. So we asked them if they would collaborate with us to turn their training program into a monthly practice that we could then share with our brand community.
I love that you went that extra step. You did that. I mean, so talk about a couple of the exercises. Talk about what they are.
So we decided we were going to be the guinea pigs for the exercises. So there's 5 exercises. And I will be honest, like when I first started doing them, I thought they weren't really for me because I thought I fancied myself being all open and inclusive anyway. You know, I've got a black business partner, I got brown friends. I felt like I'm good, but all the other people, let's do it just to test for the other people. So we started doing it, and actually right at the beginning, we have a little piece which is about the things that don't work. And I want to tell you about them because they felt really intuitive to me. I thought like, no, this is going to work. So I was like, okay, you know what we'll do? We'll have people start with a blank slate. And the scientists were like, no, that won't work because you don't have a blank slate. You have, for me, 50 years worth of inputs from a very biased culture.
Right.
So no, you can't start from a blank slate. And I was just like, okay, well, we'll just imagine everybody's the same color, just colorblind. And they're like, no.
That's a big one.
Removing somebody's cultural connection just to make them, equal is the disrespectful way to go. And I'm like, right, okay, understood. And then the third one was also that just even once you understand how the brain works and how stereotypes get started, it still doesn't get rid of your biases. So even that you understand doesn't actually unpack all of the biases you've gotten your whole life since you were 3 years old.
Yeah.
So 3 years old, biases start to show up at that age. So just learning that at the beginning, I was like, oh, dearie me, like it's not going to be as easy as I thought. I thought like, no, I've figured it out. I'm all good. I'm good to go. So one of the exercises that sounds deceptively simple is called stereotype awareness. And it's where you have to actively catch some of the stereotypes sort of in the moment and understand how they affect your behavior. So it sounds simple, right? Just like, oh, I'm going to see if I got any stereotypes back there.
Right.
But they're in your subconscious. So it's very automatic the way your brain uses the stereotypes to judge
And that's
people.
everybody. We all do that.
So everybody does it, and some are more harmful than others. Though,
Right,
you know.
right.
So the very first time this hit me was when I was out in my front garden. I'm doing some vegetable garden, and I look up, and there's an African-American gentleman walking down the road. He's got a full-length black leather coat on, a black beanie hat, and some mirror sunglasses, and a fair amount of swagger.
Yes.
And I sort of look up, and I'm thinking, oh, I felt the first thought that came into my head was like, I should go inside.
Yeah.
And I was scared. And I thought, gosh, okay, because I'm doing these exercises. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm scared. Why am I scared? Am I scared because he's black? And then I thought, yes, it's because he's black. Mind you, I have never had a personal negative experience with a person of color. So I'm like, well, how did I get scared of this guy if they've got no experience?
Right.
Well, a whole world of bias information has been fed to me. So I decided, like, I've got to do the opposite of what I was sort of intuitively wanting to do, which was run away into the house. So he approaches, and I think, right, I'm just going to say hello to him like I would any other neighbor. So I, go to say hello to him, and he's already beaming this, like, wonderful smile at me. And he says, looks up at my house, and he's like, oh, I really like what you've done with your house.
No
so
way.
I've just finished a remodel, and he noticed. He said, but you forgot one thing. And I was like, what? What have I forgotten? He's like, you forgot to put your wind chime up. I really love harmonizing to that when I walk by. And I, my shoulders go down, and I'm like, oh, what a lovely thing to say. And it turns out he works around the corner at the church. He's really into gardening. We now discuss, how to get bugs off my kale, and now we are fast friends.
It's amazing.
And you can see, that's a tiny example, but how that tiny little change in thinking and then behavior created a different dynamic.
And how much you miss when that doesn't happen. If you weren't aware, if you weren't practicing this exercise and that happened and you went in, how much you would have missed in that moment.
Yeah. And he's fabulous. He's really into fashion. He's got this favorite outfit, which is like a red top, red trousers, and red shoes. And we always do. When he comes by, I'm just like, you're looking really red today, But anyway, he's a fabulous fellow, and we really are good friends now. And I just think, like, that would not have happened.
I love that
would not
story.
have happened.
It's beautiful.
So that is exercise number 1, stereotype awareness. And like I said, it's like you really need to bring a bit of mindfulness. It sort of sets up this duality where you're sort of keeping an eye on yourself, you know what I mean?
Which is difficult.
Yeah, and then once you catch one, you have to kind of go like, wait a minute, where did that come from? What is it? So a little bit of mindfulness is sort of required.
Are you finding that it's getting easier? Do you still do that?
Yeah, no, it's so easy now. So I've been doing this for 1.5 years now. And now I sort of joyfully sort of pluck stereotypes out. It's like a little Marie Kondo. I'm sort of clearing the clutter of bias out of my brain. So another situation that occurred that leads to one of the other exercises, I was just sort of chatting with a friend who was getting her online profile sorted out. She was going to start dating. And she just came up with this big generalization where she's just sort of like, I don't really fancy Asian men, and she was trying to figure out how to screen them out.
Yeah.
And in response, I found myself going like, oh, I don't like Asian men either.
Yeah.
So I had a moment where I just went like, oh, did I just say I don't like, do you know how big that population
That's
is?
a big population.
It's a huge population.
Yeah.
And I thought, uh-oh, what is that about? Like, what? I haven't even been out with an Asian person, probably the problem. I don't have that many Asian friends. And I was thinking, where does this stereotype come from that I don't fancy them? And I went sort of digging around. I had this kind of like where I'm scanning my brain. And I thought, yeah, I don't think of Asian men as sort of sensual and sexy. I don't think of them as well dressed. I've got some sort of bad pocket protector visual, from some engineer department. I didn't think they were very funny, not very dry sense of humor, and that they were only like women that are submissive, and that, isn't me.
Yes.
So that's all I had. Sorry, Asian men. It's a work in progress.
I love your candor. That's and I don't
that's
think
what
you're
I
alone.
found.
Yes.
That's what I found in there. I
Right.
was like, where did they come from?
Yeah.
Don't even know where they came from.
Right.
So one of the exercises is a cultural immersion, and it's when you actually go and actively try and immerse yourself in somebody else's culture, a different perspective than your own. So I decided I was going to watch a lot of Korean dramas to see if I could, sort of balance out this funny stereotype that I had. And in the very first episode of my first Korean drama, it busted all of my stereotypes in one episode. I totally had a crush on the lead guy. He's super sexy. The dialogue was snappy and funny, dry sense of humor. The fashion was fantastic. There was women in like powerful roles. And I was like, wow, where did... Busted.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
So sorted out all in one Korean drama.
Totally changed your whole perspective.
Yes.
What was it called? What's it called?
It's called Descendants of the Sun.
Descendants of the Sun.
And it was on Netflix, so you can do this from the comfort of your couch,
See, I love that. If we don't have something prompting us to do these exercises, we don't do them as human beings. We go through our whole lives thinking a certain thing, and
it's hard to be active. So it's just, we're so used to being passive, and it makes sense because our brain, we use 30% of our energy for our brain. So our brains are actually wired for automation and efficiency. So it's sort of like, it's like you don't have to think about how to clean your teeth anymore. When kids kind of can't find their, when they're learning how to do something. Once you learn how to do something, the brain is like, okay, let's automate that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, around 3 years old, we start to kind of group people in these simple ways, just really simple. Then we are influenced by the media and entertainment and our parents and the playground. And all of these very solid pictures get made. And then your brain is like, good, I'll just rely on them. Don't need to do any more research. I've got it all sorted out. And that's what we use to judge people.
And like you said, though, in some situations, it's one thing if it's, a simple thing. But in a lot of situations, we're talking about life and death or,
Yes, we are. And very and not opportunities, like getting jobs, having equal opportunity, even just sort of being welcome somewhere, One of the other things that's really important in the cultural immersion is to actually get out and have some experience so that you can do it from the comfort of your couch in certain circumstances. But we really advocate getting out and sort of participating in things. And another situation I found myself in really kind of sent off about 3 light bulbs all at once for me in terms of understanding and empathy. And that comes from really experiencing something emotionally. So once a week, I actually just look for something to participate in that's sort of out of my cultural zone.
That's awesome.
And this particular week, I saw a talk. It was a black lady who's been a self-employed artist for about 30 years, and she was giving a talk about sort of how one manages that kind of lifestyle. So I thought, that would be an interesting perspective. I'll go to that. So I was on my way there and just sort of, this is how we do things last minute. I was looking up where I was going. And it said Algo QPOC. And I thought, God, is that a sorority or something? It's a very funny word.
Yeah.
And what came up in my map was that Algo is in fact a national organization for queer people of color. So QPOC. I'm so unhip. I don't even know the analogies,
Yeah.
So I thought, it's being held at their headquarters and it's a talk for queer people of color. So I had a crisis of confidence. Mind you, I'm on my way there and I thought, maybe I'm not supposed to go to this because, I'm not queer and obviously not a person of color. But something struck me that I thought, I'm not going to be welcome. I was kind of nervous to go because I thought people would look at me funny. And I decided it would be a really good exercise to sort of experience what it's like to be sort of in a room where you might not feel welcome.
Yes.
Where you can't actually make yourself inconspicuous. So I thought, maybe I could fake being queer, whatever. I don't know what that is.
No.
But I'm not going to be able to fake being a person of color.
Right.
So it's sort of role reversal to many situations where I think people of color go and they can't blend in. You can't make yourself inconspicuous.
That's a constant in Austin, Texas.
Well, and especially here, yes.
Right.
So I thought, no, I must go and just sort of try to empathize with this feeling.
Yeah.
So on the way there, I also thought I wasn't quite sure what queer really encompassed. I really am so unhip in this. I mean, I've got lesbian, gay, and transgender down, but I was
Yes.
just like, what is queer these days? So
They're adding more letters too. I mean,
I know,
there's I and A and other things. So yes.
Yeah. So I call my one lesbian friend, and I'm just like, okay, what's queer encompassed these days, just so I know a little bit going in. And she's just sort of like, yeah, that's just people who don't want to be defined by their sexuality at all. They don't want to be put in a box.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh God, this is sort of the ultimate non-stereotype, right?
Yeah.
And then I also thought, like, I don't want to be defined by my sexuality either, really. You know, I mean, that's not all you have to be. But anyway, so I'm just like, okay, right, I'm armed with, I know what queer is now. And so I go, and I get there just as everybody is seated and the lady's about to start her talk. And the whole place is packed. There's only one seat left. So I go in the door, and the lady's just about to start her talk, and she just looks at me, and she points to this one seat at the very front. And I suddenly thought, I can't sit in the front. Like, I suddenly felt
Why?
really nervous.
Okay,
Because
yeah.
I'm trying to be inconspicuous.
Yes,
I'm trying
no.
to pretend, you know. And so I just do this really funny thing where I sort of do a funny wave, and then I scurry along the wall and perch myself on this very uncomfortable bookshelf. And, you know, I was just sort of like, oh no, I don't want to go up there. And it struck me that being in this situation, not being able to blend in, not being able to make myself invisible, changed my personality.
Wow.
Like, I'm normally loud and obnoxious.
Right.
You know, and I like to participate even if people don't want me to. And there I was, like a little frightened mouse, just sort of trundling along the wall. And I thought, God, you know, I'm totally different.
I love that you experienced that, and I hope more, I'm just going to say, I hope a lot of white people take this to heart and do this. Because when this is your daily life, when you walk into places and you sort of scan the room to see if you're the only person of color, it does affect everything. It affects how you relate, how you act, how you walk. So I love that you experienced that.
Yeah.
Imagine that being your daily life, what that does to you emotionally.
I'd be exhausted. I mean, I was
Exhausted,
scared,
yes.
number one. And then I'm just like, God, why am I acting like this? You know, this isn't really me. But there I was being all nervous and, you know, just sort of frightened that I wouldn't be welcome. I mean, the talk was fantastic. It was really interesting. One of the things that I also learned was just that this difficulty they navigate with how they want people to address them.
Yes.
So the he, she, they, and this particular
pronouns.
Yes, this particular lady. Oh, she's not a lady. See, I made that mistake. She likes to be referred to as a mermaid.
As a mermaid.
Yeah, and I was like, I love mermaids.
Wow.
I was like, look, we got something in common already. I can be a mermaid. Anyway, I learned a lot in that particular.
I wish I want to go to a thing like that, because that's. I'll be honest. My daughter is schooling me on all of that, like gender issues and mermaid. There was a very interesting question and answer at the end also. So there was a undocumented Mexican queer person there, and he was talking just how difficult it was in his culture. His parents feel like he's frittering away the opportunity by being a creative and by being queer, and he feels really separated from his family. So there were, and also black people in their community, they feel there's a fair amount of homophobia and how they're sort of navigating within their own cultures. They weren't talking to me, but even within their own cultures, sort of navigating, you know, their difference. In how that affects them and their work, you know. But anyway, I had like 3 light bulbs on that particular cultural immersion. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Let's. This is a good time to check in with Chuka. Chuka, our technical director, has been listening. Chuka, what do you think about all this and stereotypes, and what's your take?
I totally understand that just from experience moving through my daily life. With projections that I make onto other people, projections that I make about myself when I move through certain spaces, and a couple things you guys are talking about, especially being exhausted by a lot of this interior, you know, stuff that happens when you're trying to deal and negotiate those stereotypes with yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said about stereotypes against yourself. That strikes me, that it's so embedded, what we all learn, that you can have stereotypes about your own being. I mean, that's just warped in a way. And it's just a terrible thing we have to go through life that way, when we don't have to.
No, but, you know, this idea that just understanding how this all works isn't enough to change your behavior. I mean, not your behavior necessarily, but my behavior. I started doing this. I think in my mind, I thought I was doing these exercises, for Magat, to be a better friend to my brown friends or whatever it was. But the truth is, I'm the one that's benefiting so much. In place of all the kind of fear and small-mindedness and judgment, it's just this bubbling curiosity. I'm like the nosiest person on the planet now, I'm sure I'm going to be more irritating than I normally am. But
I would love for viewers, people watching, think about that. If you're looking for, we're in February now or March, whenever this airs, but this is a really good time to think about these exercises. Get outside of yourself. Use this year to find ways to be curious about race and skin. And I love it. I love that you're doing this. I love the concept of skin is skin. I want to talk quickly before we go about your merchandise, which I think is some of the, let me whip out my lip balm.
I have one here too.
Yes. So,
just by chance.
And I love it. I've been using it ever since I got it. It's Skin is Skin lip balm. My flavor is almond and soul. What's yours?
I have mint and curiosity. And there's a little bit of a story around this. So Magat has a background in skincare, and she wanted to make something in Senegal, which is her hometown, because we have an alternative focus on giving jobs to women in Africa and creating a bit of independence for them over there. And we also source all of our ingredients from women's co-ops in Senegal. But for the purpose of connecting the lip balm with our practices about encouraging curiosity, empathy, love, soul, all of these qualities that we really believe are necessary to rewire your brain. We wanted to put this little secret ingredient in the lip balm because we're all in such busy mode all day that we sort of forget. And we thought that, people have a tactile sort of object that helps sort of switch them back on throughout the day. So every time you sort of take care of your lips, we're thinking, okay, I've got to remind myself to be curious. I've got to remind myself to be empathetic. So we really wanted to sort of connect the product to the activity or the personal actions that we're encouraging.
I think that's a brilliant idea. I love everything about what you guys are doing. I do. If you want to purchase this, just go to skiniskin.com.
That's correct.
And you can just go in there and play around. There's all sorts of things on their website, all sorts of merchandise. They have tattoos. Do you have your tattoo?
I have my tattoo.
There's tattoos, there's temporary, so you can, because skin. Skiniskin.com. Thank you so much for being here, Sharon.
Yes.
I can't wait to see what the future holds. Before we go, is there anything that your organization needs from our viewers? Anything that they can contribute?
Well, our main purpose is really for people to do the exercises and change their behavior. So that is the main thing. Buying the lip balm means that we can continue to do our work in this area. And actually right now we're looking to turn our exercises into an app so that people can be sort of led through the process and reminded in another way. And so we're currently looking for an app developer to help us out on that.
So app developer, go to the website, practice some of those exercises, and get this wonderful lip balm.
Yes.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Thank you so much for being on Brainstorm Black. And yes, and we will see you next time. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on Brainstorm Black. Thank you.